Today we're going to talk about next generation firewalls. So I've been in IT since 1989. That's a very long time ago. And I've been with Network Solutions for 15 years and have been focused on security for about 10 years. The agenda for today, we're going to go over just a brief history of the firewall and the origin of the next generation firewall and the key differentiators between a next generation firewall and some of the legacy firewalls. We'll talk about the components of the next generation firewall as well. Okay, so back in the day, the first firewall was really just NAT with access rules. So NAT is just network address translation, the ability to translate a private address to a public address and associate a very simple access list rule that says what IP address you're coming from, what IP address you're coming to, and what protocol and port. And that was about it for the first firewall until the second generation firewall came out. And then they introduced the concept of a connection state. So now a connection state is, think of it like this. If you're on your network, there are two zones. There's a trusted zone from the perspective of your firewall, a trusted zone and an untrusted zone. So the trusted zone is permitted to go to the untrusted zone, but the untrusted zone is not permitted to go to the trusted zone unless specified in the configuration. Right, so this is great in that if you're on your LAN and you're browsing the web, you go out to a web server over the internet, and then you have to open a connection to allow that return traffic to come back. When that connection is no longer needed, the firewall breaks it down. So now your rules in the firewall can also add in there the connection state. So we still have network address translation, access list rules. Now you got connection state to try to keep unwanted traffic from coming in. Okay. So your third generation firewall introduced application visibility, an application level filter. Now, that in the context of that particular generation of firewall says a lot more than what it actually did. In a Cisco world, that's what you call inspection. So for a subset of ports and protocols, applications that pertain to those protocols, it understands how those protocols normally work. It knows how FTP works. It knows how email, SMTP works. And if some rogue application tries to hijack one of those ports and protocols and make it behave in a way that it's not supposed to, then your application filter will say, that's not quite right. This is not supposed to be used like this, and it'll shut down the connection. So again, that was only for a very small subset of well-known applications that have to do with that application firewall. And again, it sort of understands the behavior of how it works and can stop that down, shut it down. The next generation firewalls add to that concept and make it much deeper and wider. So now they have deep packet inspection allows them to have much more granular visibility to not just this subset of applications, but a much wider, deeper subset of applications and exactly how they work and how they're supposed to behave. And we'll expand on that quite a bit. Right, so here's your definition of next generation firewall, which I will admit I just pulled straight from Wikipedia, because I looked up some other ones and it does a pretty good job at it. So deep packet inspection allows you to do things like intrusion prevention. It allows you to do things like advanced malware protection or malware protection, antivirus, identity management, SSL, encryption, decryption, a lot of features which we'll expand on. Right? Application visibility and control is the foundation of a next generation firewall. It allows you to take just generic traffic and take it apart to identify applications. So in your stateful firewalls, it was all good to say, look, TCP port 80, that's World Wide Web, right? That's just browsing. But how many web applications use TCP port 80? A bunch. TCP 443, a lot of them. So you need to be able to get deeper into those and figure out which of those applications are out there, not just this is web traffic, right? So Cisco uses a technology called OpenAppID to recognize applications. It can recognize from the data stream and deep packet inspection what applications are going on in this data stream. As well, it can help identify hosts within your network, really without even any clients. It can say, okay, this is coming from a Windows box or coming from a Mac or an Android. It can get even further than that and say, sometimes it can tell, okay, now you're coming from this Windows machine and it's running Java and it's running this particular Java version. Oh, and by the way, that particular Java version has vulnerabilities. Because now that it has a database of the applications, it's keeping track of the applications that are crossing your firewall and what particular versions of these applications. Now it can utilize threat intelligence to tell, you have these applications and these versions, and here are your vulnerabilities. And so that gives you the ability to be proactive, to go out and patch those in a timely manner. This is me speaking to a certain credit agency that's been in the news lately that would have saved a lot of people, say, concern for the rest of their life if they would have just patched things in a timely manner, which is quite basic and elementary. Right, so, when you have this visibility to the hosts that are on your network and the specific applications, as well as, it still considers the ports and the protocols and the behavior, now you have the ability to implement intrusion prevention. So the term next generation intrusion prevention discerns between just your classic one that I talked about before that just watches signatures with a high chance of false positives, and intelligent intrusion prevention that can get a good, accurate picture of what's going on in your network to be able to more positively identify intrusions and reduce false positives and increase overall visibility. Security is visibility and control, which means you can't control what you cannot see. If you ask somebody with a stateful firewall what kind of traffic is going across your firewall, what sort of application traffic, they're going to say, I don't know, right? They won't know. So with application visibility and control, you get a very granular view of what all applications are going across your network, all the hosts. That increased visibility is a lot of power and a big part of mitigating threats. Okay. Oh, and this little screenshot over there was just taken off of Cisco's website. If you just sort of Google application visibility and control, eventually you can get to sort of a live database of what all applications are out there. You can even expand on it and get a little more detail if you want. Right, this is all this stuff, again, compiled from OpenAppID. Next generation intrusion prevention. Again, so, real-time contextual awareness. Contextual awareness means not just watching those data streams going by for signatures, but where's it coming from, where's it going to, what time of day, what else all is involved. That's context, and that context gives you greater accuracy, fewer false positives. Advanced threat protection speaks to the fact that it does still use global threat intelligence database, can pull updates of all these sort of rules from an intelligence database, so you can come mitigating or closer to mitigating zero-day threats. Sort of a false term, but global threat intelligence and intelligent security automation. Again, when you reduce your false positives, you can more accurately mitigate these threats and reduce false positives. Advanced malware protection. We'll talk about that a little bit coming up, but your traditional antivirus works on point in time. And these future slides will talk about this a bit more, and we'll talk about the difference between the two. So continuous analysis means it doesn't look at what's just going on right now. It looks at, is that file disposition going to change down the road? First it comes through and it looks like it's benign, but come to find out later it's malicious. Retrospective security means it can tell you, hey, you remember that file that we let through some time ago? Well, that file is actually malicious. And then reduce event notifications, meaning false positives, and integrated malware analysis. Let's talk a little bit more about what advanced malware protection is. So again, your point-in-time antivirus, your traditional antivirus, will take a file and check its disposition, and it's got two known dispositions. It's either known bad, so it'll drop it, or it's unknown. So it's only got a bad list. It tells you what to drop. And then if it goes through the unknown list, then it lets it through and never looks at it again. Okay, so this list is usually maintained through signatures. It looks at the file. Is this file on my bad list? Okay, you're allowed to go through, and never looks at it again. So Cisco takes the approach that it will do its best to try to prevent these attacks, continuously monitor these files, and then give you the ability to respond, which I'll expand on here in just a minute. So comparing Cisco to your point-in-time antivirus, Cisco actually have 3 dispositions. The first one is known bad. All right. So as a file comes through, it's going to look in its local cache for the kind of files that it sees all the time. And it's going to get one of 3 dispositions. Known bad, where it'll drop it. Known good, where it says, I've already analyzed this. I know it's good. I'm going to let it through. Or unknown, where it can take further action. But before I get there, though, keep in mind that what AMP will do first is take a SHA-256 of the file. Instead of just looking at the file by host name, it just crunches the file down to a string of characters, and that is a unique identifier for that file globally. And that's what it used to do much of its analysis for efficiency. So to continue, after it checks its local cache for a disposition, if it finds the file is unknown, at that point it can do a cloud AMP lookup. So it says, all right, I have this SHA, it's an unknown disposition. Through Talos, it can say, AMP cloud, what is the disposition of this file? And AMP will come back with one of 3 dispositions: known good, known bad, or unknown. It passes known good or known bad back down to the firewall, and then the firewall just drops or passes it depending. If it's unknown, there's this additional option where it can take the file as a whole and submit it to ThreatGrid for analysis. And ThreatGrid will take this file apart, sandbox it, look for indications of compromise, compare it to other known malware, do a lot of other technical stuff with it, and come up with a good disposition. It's going to come up with only 2 dispositions, known good or known bad. And it's going to plug those dispositions into AMP, the AMP cloud. So the next person on the planet who comes looking for that file, if it doesn't have it in its local cache, it just needs to do a very quick AMP lookup and doesn't need to resubmit and reanalyze this file. That's very efficient. And it means if someone on the other side of the planet has already analyzed that file, as soon as it comes back, you get immediately you can find the disposition of that file, which is very powerful. It means the sort of whole planet works together to mitigate malware. So in some systems, there are 2 ways of doing this. You can either wait while it analyzes it, or on more common and more typically, you're just going to let it go through and continue to analyze it, and then here's why. Because AMP can then say, if it comes through with a bad analysis, can do a retrospective alert and say, whoa, that file is bad, go get the file. Yeah, but then again, the next person who goes to look for that file then doesn't have to go through that whole routine again. So keep in mind that your next generation firewall is only one component of your security system as a whole. Excuse me. So when looking for your security components, I recommend you actually sit down with a professional and review your entire security policy to look at all of the components, what you currently have in place. Identify what your assets are first. I mean, what are you trying to protect? What are you trying to keep from getting out there? Then analyze your current controls, evaluate how effective they are for each of these security components, and then come up with a plan to have a complete security system that's comprised of components that all work well together. And the key is there that they all need to work together. So your next generation firewall, it may not be the best choice to have an all-in-one box that does, firewall, intrusion prevention, malware prevention, URL filtering, and that's it. That's all it does. But it doesn't talk to anything else on your network. So it can't pass any of that information around. Where in the case of Cisco's next generation firewall, it communicates and passes contextual security information between all of its components, its other components, identity services, endpoint protection, your URL or DNS filter, your email filter, can all work together as a system. Anomaly detection, those all work together as a security system to give you better overall analysis. So when there's an event, and I say when, because no vendor is going to be 100% effective at removing threats. You can only mitigate threats. And that's why Cisco's after phase that we'll talk about here is important. Because you need to realize, let's go to, So Cisco is before, during, and after phase. The after is just Cisco being honest to say, look, some things are going to get through. Things will get through. It can't eliminate the threats. Any vendor that tells you it'll eliminate those threats is not being truthful. But when it does get through, what do you do about it? How do you scope it? How do you contain it? And then how do you remediate it to keep it from spreading throughout your network? Right, so, to go back a couple. And that's where AMP does, from the perspective of file analysis, is it allows you to go through then and say, okay, well, one got through, what do we do about it? Well, let's go get that file, let's quarantine that file. Or if it's in the case of a firewall or another system, it might just make you aware, hey, we sent a file through some time ago, so it gives you the opportunity to go do something about it. Talos is Cisco's threat intelligence database that I alluded to before. It is comprised of a number of threat intelligence databases that Cisco have acquired over the years to come up with a comprehensive threat intelligence database that contains all sorts of things pertaining to security. It sees in excess of 3 times the traffic that Google does every day. So it's got tremendous global visibility, and it's a very powerful system. And that's what more and more and more of Cisco's security products are tapping into that to give it more context. Right, so the before, during, and after model that I discussed. But before, again, is where you're trying to keep things, prevent them before they happen. During is where you are going to catch them in the act. And then after is what do you do about it for the things that get through. And that's Cisco's model. So any number of their products, and that list might even be a little stale as they're adding new products and new acquisitions, and they all fall somewhere into this, to where that is a security system working together to pass all this information back and forth to each other.
Let's start with why should you listen to me? So I've been at Cisco now 11 years. For the first 8 years of my life at Cisco, I was an engineer. For the first part of my life, I was a security engineer. Before I was at Cisco, I was at a company, anybody remember a company called Cabletron? Okay, I was hired there when they were called that. They bought a company called Network Security Wizards, which had a Dragon IDS. So just kind of a little history lesson, Dragon IDS was written by Ron Gula, and Marty Resch wrote Snort. They were roommates in college and really good buddies, right? So one went open source, one went, so it was a real small circle back in the day, but that's how I kind of got mixed in everybody in the sands and all that kind of stuff. Before that, I was in the U.S. Air Force building secure networks for them around the world, responsible anywhere from the PC all the way to bulk encrypting it through an IDNX out through the satellite. So I've been doing security in one way, shape, or form for over 20 years, and been doing a lot of it here at Cisco, and kind of really excited about where we are. And so what I want to talk about today is kind of what's changed in security, why Cisco's buying all these companies, what are we doing, kind of give you the big picture, and why we feel we're positioned much better than anybody else in the industry as a security company. Does that work? All right. So first and foremost, we got to start what's changed. What's changed is this is not the I love you virus anymore. This is not the blaster worm. This is not an engineering student in their basement weaponizing a vulnerability and throwing it out the door and not having any idea what's about to happen, right? These are chaos math graduates, right, writing these tools. And the reason they can afford them is because it's a $1 trillion business, right? There's a lot of money behind what these tools are coming out. So we can't take the same way that we've been scanning attacks and different things before and apply it to today. So how we did it before is we would take a signature and it would say, ABC, ABC. Well, we go so far into the packet, we match it, it's the ABC virus, knock it down, right? Easy. Not that easy anymore, because as Jason stated, I mean, there's a event horizon that happens, and they're equipped to get past that event horizon. And many of our competitors out there do not track anything past that. So a lot of the question was, you let it in, and the reason I say we track it is because a lot of our competitors don't. They call it the sacrificial lamb, right? It only takes one to get in, especially nowadays with the malware that has a worm attached to it, right? You only need one in there, and it starts propagating everything else. So you can't just let that sacrificial lamb in and be like, well, we know what it is now if it comes in again, but it's already in there somewhere, right? We don't do that, right? We actually track where it goes and understand how that's put together. Here's the challenge. These are our competitors, right? This is your guys' problem, right? I got to put a security solution together, and I got to pick one from every one of these buckets. Does anybody believe you just need a firewall and that's it? Okay? No. So we need security in every one of these buckets. So how do I do that, right? How do I put together a solution that's going to be good for me? And you say, well, Snowflake's good, right? I got vendor A here and vendor B over here. It's a big secret of what security stuff I have, so I want nobody to know it, right? Back in the olden days, that was truth, right? Because we didn't want it was all about a signature base, and whoever had the signature base, if I knew you were running a certain IDS, then I would go look at that signature base and I would figure out what vulnerabilities are missing, and that's what I would use to attack you. It's not that way anymore, right? So we don't stack up, Sophos and Trend and all these different folks. Hopefully somebody has the right signature to trigger. So it's a different mindset. So how do we then look at the attacks? So this is the whiteboard session I do normally and put it in the slides. But if we look at the top level, that's their timeline, right? The security attack enters the network, and then the security breach happens. The time can be relative. If it's ransomware, it could be a half an hour, right? If they're taking over your financial group, it could be months, years, right? They'll move very slowly, right? There's a company in town. Hopefully everybody's seen the press release that they got attacked last year, I think it was, and the FBI called them and told them that they were about to be breached by a hacker group in Russia. FBI sat on it for 2.5 months before they called them, right? And they were moving slowly. They were cleaning their tracks. They would have never known unless the FBI called them. So we gotta be cognizant of their timeline. But here's our timeline on the bottom here. So if we're aware of our real attacks, I mean, hopefully everybody agrees that our number one threat today is malware, right? Anybody disagree with that, right? But whether you click on it, whether it's delivered to you, whether you click on a link, whatever it is, it's a piece of malware getting on your system and wreaking havoc, right? So with that, malware over, I'd say close to 94, 95% of malware, when it shows up in our scanner and goes against that malware list because it polymorphs and it changes, a lot of times it's not in our list, right? It's not in anybody's list, right? Because it's brand new, especially if they're spear phishing or doing something. So that means that our investigation starts when we see it. So the first time we see it, that means whatever tool, whether it's your email system, whether it's your endpoint, whether it's your firewalls, whatever sees it starts that investigation, okay? And then hopefully we can get to a point to where we discover it and remove it in a good amount of time. So the best we can do is actually start the investigation when we first see it, right? We can't say, well, come in on Tuesday, that's when I'm free, and you guys start your attack then, and I have time, right? So whenever it starts, that's where we start our investigation, and hopefully we can get down there. So how do we affect our lines on the bottom here? We can't affect the lines up top because we have no control over what they're doing. So how do we affect the lines down here? More visibility, right? You say, well, I got some visibility. I got a firewall on the perimeter. I got, so I got north to south, and I got another tool that might be doing something over here, and so, but it's all about understanding where these attacks are coming in. And I'll give you kind of a real world example for visibility. So my kids are out of the house now, but when my boys were at the house, they drove me nuts because they wanted to use the front door. And I'm being a military guy, I want my house secure when everybody leaves it, right? Especially when I go to bed, I don't want anything unlocked. And so I want them to use the garage door. They all have garage door openers, but it was easier for them to go in and out the front door. But they would leave a deadbolt unlocked. Drove me insane, right? So I bought an August smart lock, and I put the August smart lock on there. So they open the door and they go out, and I told them, you go out that door and you unlock it, you're not getting back in it, because after 3 minutes it locks back up, okay? So then my phone then says we're secure, okay? But the problem is I don't know whether or not that door is open or not. So what they started to do is they would unlock it, leave the door open, and the deadbolt would stick out. My phone says we're secure, right? Then I had to get up out of bed and go and look to see if the door was open or not. So then I had to put another sensor on the door to make sure whether or not it was open, right? More visibility, right? Case in point there. On the other side, if we have less visibility, this discover and remove moves in. right? To where we can't. They're gonna be a full, or excuse me, I went the wrong way. So this is less visibility. Our investigation starts later. More visibility. We discover and remove. We can move that in. So that's kind of our advantage to have more things around to be able to get to this. So in a kill chain that I'm going to show you earlier, where we have a kill chain of malware, how it all kind of transpires. If we can stop it somewhere in this kill chain before it pops that page and says, hey, surprise, you owe $300, right? So before we get there, right, if we can stop it somewhere in here, right, we win, right? We basically put their whole motion on pause. It gives us time to figure out what it is and get it out of our system. Does that make sense? All right, so now that we agree we need more visibility, we need all these things up here, right? So we need, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just examples. But next generation firewalls, right? Endpoint solution. We need a network solution. We need email, DNS, next generation IPS. But now we have two ways of buying this, right? So we've seen that big old slide with all my competitors on there, right? The one way of buying it is what I call do-it-yourself security. Okay? Do-it-yourself security is how we've been buying security for a long time. We line them all up, and I got this set of criteria, and I'm going to say, well, I like this feature, that feature, this feature. Give me that one. And more likely it all comes down to price anyways, right? So I'll pick vendor A for this, vendor B for this, and vendor C for that. But then the problem is that we create silos. And this is our snowflake network. But here's the problem with the way that the attacks work. So the attack comes in, and let's say the endpoint was the first thing to see that attack, right? Or that piece of malware. We send it up for investigation. When we send it up for investigation, it comes back with valuable information. One, is this file good or bad? Two, here's SHA hash of this file and other files it may download. Here's IP addresses it may reach out to for command and control. Here's domains it might reach out to in its kill chain. We get valuable information, but now wouldn't that information be great to pass over to other pieces of our network? Right? What happens here, this is your job. This is manual at this point. So the endpoint, company X, finds out that, hey, this file is malicious and here's the SHA hash of it. You have to take that SHA hash, go over to the other silo and say blacklist is SHA until they catch up. Make sense? So now your network is broken in the architecture. So it's like, and what I say all the time in an analogy, it's like if you're a police commissioner of a city, you're gonna send all your police force out without any radios. So the guy in the park's real good at catching a threat, but he has no way of telling the guy down the street the threat's coming, or what it looks like, right? And so that's what we do here at Cisco. Why we're buying all these companies? It's not just to make a bunch of different SKUs, so we make a lot of money for Laura. It's actually we have a whole system here. Oh yeah. But what we do here is Talos is our centrifuge of that brain, right? Not only do we provide you security intelligence, we also take that information that it learns and feeds out all the rest of the products, right? So if you had, because right now, if I get something on my endpoint, I want my email system to know right now not to allow that file in. As soon as I know something, I want everything else to know, right? Automatically, I want to be at home sleeping when this happens, right? All my remote users that are running my agents, I want all of them to know. I don't want to have to wait and go look and see, well, what did X discover today, and what did Y discover, and now we gotta make sure they're both matched up and they both have the same information. No, I want everything to know, right? And so this is just assuming that all products are created equal, right? All firewalls are created equal. No competitor in the world can do this, right? That's where Cisco is poised better than everybody else. And so, because we do this, we take away those silos, we actually give you an architecture. We give you a solution to work together. And for the managers in the room, imagine somebody that built you all that siloed network and then decides to go somewhere else, right? Now you got to find somebody with that exact talent, with those exact same skills, or train an individual in the same exact way, and you think you're giving him all that training, he's going to stay with you, right? He's going to go somewhere else and use those now new letters on the end of his name for more money, right? So that's these are the things that we kind of look at from top level down. So Cisco, what do we deliver? It's not. I don't want you to think I'm giving you hokey products that can just talk together. These are best of breed products. I'll go up against anybody head to head, right? And I'm really combative. So if you want to schedule a meeting and put them in a meeting with me, I'd love that, right? So So best of breed, because a lot of times they say stuff that ain't true, and I'm like, what? But all right, so best of breed portfolio. We have integrated intelligence. So this is our Talos group. So now I actually took a slide out because I don't want to be too abrasive, but there's a slide that I have on the end if you want to see it. Is like all of our competitors and the numbers that they come up with security intelligence around the world, right? How many emails we see, how many samples of malware do we see, and what do we turn that into actionable items? We dwarf their numbers, right? Nobody compares to the security intelligence that our Talos group puts out, right? And they say they'll come back and they'll say, we got a security alliance, right? Everybody's an alliance, so all now data is created equal. Well, there's a footnote on the alliance. The alliance says you can only take out what you put in. So if we have millions of terabits of data and they only got thousands of terabits of data, they can only pull out thousands of terabits of data, right? So it's not created equal. And then the integrated architecture, which we just talked about. So how does it all work together, right? The threat comes in, the endpoint obviously sees it once. We send it up to the cloud. The cloud either knows about it or doesn't know about it. If it doesn't know about it, it sends it through Threat Grid. Threat Grid tears it apart, re-engineers it, and that's a key point. We don't just run it through a sandbox to see, well, it's going to do something good or bad. We re-engineer the file. So then if it polymorphs into something else, or what phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 looks like, we know what domains it's going for. We re-engineer their domain generation algorithm. What that means is when you see all these domains that are like somebody just typing on the keyboard randomly, right? That's an algorithm that we regenerate, and now we can guess the domains that they're going towards. So now we can give that to our umbrella team, and our umbrella team is proactively blocking those domains before they even create malware for it, right? So we're a step ahead of everybody else, and so then Threat Grid then determines what it is, and if it changes its mind and say, it's not grandma's screensaver, it's actually a piece of malware, we then can send it out to every single one of our products. I have a PDF and timeline I can send everybody if you want to see how we reacted kind of with this fashion with Talos, right? So Talos and WannaCry. When WannaCry came through, we got it from the endpoint, we got it from the DNS, we got it from little bit points, right? And then at that point, within 60 minutes of us first seeing the first reiteration of it, we sent out to every single one of our products, knocking it down. So this is an example of the kill chain, right? So the kill chain comes in, you get an email, you get a web, somebody clicks on it, I don't care how much training you do, somebody's going to click on it, right? Only takes one. Everybody gets excited when you get below 10 digits of we only had 9% of our people click on it. Well, yeah, how many you got? Because it only takes one, right? So we click on it, we get it in there, it actually infiltrates itself, escalates privileges, probably does a recon a little bit, and then calls out again to a command and control center. If it's ransomware, this is where it gets its key to encrypt, as well as this is where it calls out to get its say I'm owned and what do you want me to do, and at that time you're done. So it takes multiple products to be able to defend against this one ransomware attack, right? We have the umbrella trying to stop it before it even gets in there. So these two communications, as it pulls out, over 90-some% of the time, these are DNS resolutions. So if we can stop that ahead of time, imagine getting to a point of stopping it to communicate to go get his key. If it doesn't have a key, it can't encrypt. So we just put the ransomware on pause. So if we can get enough intelligence, right, and get ahead of this thing, and that's why we do those models and do those different things and those association gains with different domains and things like that we can try to get ahead of the domains that are being used. As well as a next generation firewall. Not everything's DNS, right? Some things are IP addresses, some things are anomalies, some things are reaching out with remote exploits and things like that we're watching at the next generation firewall. Email, still #1 threat vector, right? If you go to any decent penetration testing, black hat, anybody, they'll knock on the front door a while and then they'll go spear phishing, right? That's how they're getting in. They'll go to the one single source of truth, which is LinkedIn, and they'll figure out some kind of way to get somebody to open an email, more likely a PDF format, right? And that's actually the last 10 that I talked to were phishing attacks.
So that's where you guys are trying to get to. You just want the SHAs of all that stuff.
We want the SHAs, all that stuff, but there's also technology built into the security. So if a lot of times it'll show up, it looks like it's from the president of the company or the CFO going, or wire money here or whatever like that. But if you open up the email, you trace it back. We can do some file checks, things that way. Also, there's a lot of different things that are ahead of the game to stop before we even allow the email to be delivered. But once it's in, we can rewrite URLs, we can do all that kind of stuff. But then, yeah, the AMP is a huge piece too of those files. If you have Office 365, any Office 365 folks in there, right? Office 365, yeah. So if you have Office 365 and you use our cloud email security, we can actually reach into the mailbox and pull something out. So now that's something we can't do on an Exchange system that's sitting on-prem, right? We can't reach into the mailbox and pull it out, right? But because we're just sitting in line of the MTA. But if we have Office 365 and later, 10 minutes later, an hour later, whatever, we determine we change our mind, that file that just went in front of our eyes is bad, we can actually go and get it and pull it out before they open it. Or any other mailbox that has it, right? So this is what we're trying to build here, right? Remember I talked about the layered security of how we layered different companies because of the signature list? Now we're layering based on technology. We have Umbrella at the top watching kind of that SIG, the Secure Internet Gateway. We have next generation firewalls, the AMP for the networks. We have the email system. We have the AMP for endpoints. True north to south, east to west visibility and control, right? And better yet, we have these layers talking to each other, communicating through Talos. So now when the endpoint finds out something, it communicates up the chain, the funnel shrinks down just that much more, right? So you can't, there's no 100%. There's nothing I can sell you that's 100%, and any vendor that does, I would stop talking to them. And so, but the point is that we can make this funnel so tight because the true measure of a security success, does anybody know what the true measure is of how you measure security if you're doing well or not? Well, one of them is time to detection. You know what that is? So time to detection is the knowing when a threat enters, how long does it take you to figure out the threat's there, right? That's the gauge. The other gauge is time to remediation. Okay, now I know it's there. How long did it take me to get rid of it? Okay, so those are two metrics that you can look at in security to see how successful I am. And so you have a penetration test. How long did it take them to get in? How long did it take me to find them? How long did it take me then to fix it once I found them? Okay, all those are metrics we can measure. So when we look at the average of time to detection in the market, it's 100 days. Imagine something in your network floating around without you knowing it for 100 days. It's a long time. That's the average. We have it down, actually marketing says we're down to 3 hours, but I still got it at 7 hours. So we got down to about 7 hours. So what's the difference, right? What's the difference between us and everybody else in the market? There's a few things. I can go into great detail on our indications of compromise and how we look at threats differently. Because you think back to problems with like Target had. Target had all great tools, right? And they had everything flowing into this bucket. They actually suppressed the tools because it was too noisy, right? But yet nobody was looking at those attacks the way they should have, because it looks like noise, right? Here's a buffer overflow, it's high priority, and here's an IP address. Do I care? I don't know, right? It takes me too long to go figure out. So what we do with our indications of compromise is to look at different indications to say, to a pretty good level of certainty, this machine is owned by somebody else. Or we take the vulnerabilities that we know of that we match with the systems you have out there. So if you use like a Tenable or a Qualys, we can take that vulnerability information and import it into our system, or we can do it ourselves. And that way then we can say, well, here's a buffer overflow. Is it attacking a printer? Because I don't care. Is it attacking a Linux box? I don't care if it's a Windows attack. If it's attacking a Windows machine that's patched, I don't care. If it's attacking a Windows machine with that vulnerability, now I care, right? Because that raises that patch up pretty fast, right? I'm going to patch that this morning, and those type of things. So those are things we do to get ahead of this to get more visibility. Also with our technologies of StealthWatch. Anybody do NetFlow analytics? So imagine the ability to understand what your network looks like from a transactional standpoint and say this is normal. What does a normal Thursday look like? And if it's that normal, if it's been that normal for a year, then all of a sudden something weird happens, right? Because we're in this kill chain, like WannaCry. All of a sudden our customers started seeing spikes in SMB traffic, which was odd, right? All of a sudden now they could trigger their hair starts standing up on the back of their neck, and they're like, okay, something's going on. And use things like our identity services engine to quarantine them. No, you don't got to shut them all the way down, but you can make the crown jewels disappear. Because if they do have ransomware, I don't want them to encrypt my file share, so just make the file share disappear, right? They can do most of their work still. So the point is having that visibility, and that gets us down to this number. This is a huge differentiator for us, Talos Group. Has anybody heard of Talos before today? Okay, good. So Talos is made up of, every time we buy a company, we take their research hunters and put them in this group. So it started out with the sender base, and then we added in the guys from SourceFire, the VRT, and then we added in the threat hunters from OpenDNS, and then we continue to add in more and more and more. Now with Observable, we add those guys in as well. And so we have about close to over 300, close to 400 individuals that wake up every day and hunt. That's all they do, right? They're super smart, right? We try to bring them out to talk at things, and they're way over everybody's head, and I tell them to dumb it down a little bit, and they're still way over everybody's head. But the point is let's look at these numbers. 19.6 billion threats blocked per day. When our competitors come out and they say, well, look at our numbers, they're going to show you what they see. How much information do they see? Anybody can go to level 3 and go to their node and say, hey, I want to put a sensor on your node. And they're going to say, stack it up with everybody else's equipment over here. Okay? So you're getting now terabits of data, but what do you do with it? Right? You got 5 or 10 guys. There's no way you're going to produce these kind of numbers, right? Into 19.6 billion threats blocked per day. This is how many Google searches get. That's 6 times the amount of Google searches a day, right? 6 times, pretty close. So the point is, look at line 4 here, right? 80 billion DNS records a day. Anybody else in the world that has a firewall or is blocking malware, that's a B2B relationship. They don't have it in one house. We have it in one house. It's a cubicle to cubicle relationship for us, right? They're all in the same group. They're all working together for the common good to knock down these threats. That's why this organization is bar none better than anybody else in the world, right? And like I said, I took the slide out that beats up everybody too bad, and I don't want to offend anybody, so that's why I took it out. But it is the feel. You don't pay for Talos, right? Anytime you buy a subscription, it feeds every single one of our products. Feeds it every 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how you configure it. Okay. So back kind of bring it full circle back to the before, during, and after. So this is important because attacks are going to get in. Just as Jason stated, there's no 100%. So we're going to have the before. We're going to have the during, and better yet, we're going to have the after. Because I've been in a lot of breaches. My first one was, I was living in Georgia, and that's why I got a funny accent, anybody wants to know. University of Georgia was one of my accounts way back in the day, before they had like incident response teams and all that kind of stuff. The server that housed all the parents' credit cards was breached, right? So they call me and they're in a panic. Chad, remember all that security stuff you're telling us about? Yeah, you need to come turn it on, right? Okay, so I come back and I get there, and I was up in Tennessee, and I drove down. And I walk in the door, and they're like, okay, FBI was there, GBI was there, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, scariest of them all, Visa. Visa was there, and they said, if you don't fix this by the end of the day, you'll never process another card. And man, they were running. And so I fixed the one server and everything, and then we sat around the table the next day with the CIO, and he said, Chad, where else did it go? What else do we clean? I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know what analogy I used. I said, but you can't, watch something again if you didn't TiVo it. How am I supposed to know where it is? And I said, you got 2 options. Option 1 is I said, you give me a group of guys, and we all put on sleuth hats, and we go digging for it, and looking at all these different systems and try to find it out. I said, or we go home and cross our fingers and hope it doesn't happen again. They took option 2. And many companies did back then, because there was a breach that happened, so that's budget money they're spending to fix that breach that they didn't have already. And now I'm telling them to go spend more money just in case something might be there, right? Just go searching, for these, what are they, snipes? What did you go searching for, right? So go snipe hunting, right? They didn't want to do that. So they would so by having the information already at your fingertips, because that was the big question. Anybody have that question asked to them when WannaCry came through? Are we affected? Right? That was the big question. Are we affected? A lot of people are like, I ain't seen nothing. Nobody's calling me complaining. There's no pop-up $300 showing up on my machine. But the point is, if we can go to a system and say, all right, here's a SHA hash. I want to search a SHA hash. I want to search a file name. I want to search anything. And now tell me, every single system has touched this file, right? We can do that, right? Let me. What about the flows? I want to understand the entire flow of how it touched everything. With StealthWatch, we can do that, right? We have a policy. Anybody under compliances, PCI, HIPAA, any of that kind of stuff? Okay. So there's compliances. PCI network doesn't talk to anybody else, right? There has to be some kind of security gate. How are you checking that? The flows can tell you. If I say, well, do I see any communication between this part of the network and this part of the network? It should come up with nothing. But I need some tool to be able to tell me that, right? And that's what we can do. We can also do all the different determinations of what threats look like and all that kind of stuff. That way, with NetFlow, your whole network becomes a sensor. Everything. It's all about visibility, and if I can make every single switch port a sensor, I win, right? I have control over all the different anomalies, and I know all the different things that are happening. We do an annual security report every year. It's kind of like the Verizon report, and so that'll tell you kind of latest and greatest what's coming. Actually, last year we predicted that they would take malware and blend it with a worm, right? And surprise, WannaCry. And so they kind of predict different things like that, different actions, and so I can send you guys links for if you guys are interested in those type of things. And we interview different types of companies, not just big massive ones, but also smaller companies. And we say, okay, did you believe you were secure at the beginning of the year? Yep. Did we have any breaches throughout the year? Yep. What happened? What was the hole? What was the gap? Right? And so then we go through that. But the IoT is big, right? Because I'll give you an example. One of my customers is a Bun coffee maker. Okay. Anybody have a Bun coffee maker in their office? Okay. So Bun Coffee Maker is making a new coffee maker, has a nice big old screen and has USB ports, has cellular, has all kinds of different connections to the network, okay? They will openly admit to me that their developers of that product have absolutely no idea what security is, okay? So it doesn't have an agent, because you can't put on there because it's not an operating system. And so these developers are writing their own code, so it's not like they're gonna patch it because they don't care about security. But yet we're gonna plug it into our network. Right? So it's kind of like the reverse days of, remember we had the fax machines hooked to the telephone lines, and then we started plugging those into the network, and then that was our door in to start taking out banks and stuff like that. So we're in reverse now. So IoT is going to be huge. So even if you don't think you're plugging those things in, you are, right? Thermostats, you know, your facility folks are plugging things into your network that you need to keep an eye on. And so having the Active Directory log as your single source of truth of what's on your network is not the way to do it anymore, right? We have to know what these devices are and where they are and what they're doing. Because we put one of those devices on the wrong network, right? And then all of a sudden somebody's got a backdoor in, right? Train HVAC system for the home, right? They had one they put out, and there's millions of them sold, and they had this nice big screen on it and everything. Has a hardwired static IP or static password built into it. Same password for everybody. You know that one password, you know the password for everybody. Right? They don't care. Right? They don't get it. Right? We're back to the drawing board. Anybody remember the developers that we had to educate because they were using the buffers wrong, and we had all these buffer overflows happening? Same kind of problems, right? They just don't, the tools are there, the technology is there to write this code in there, but they just don't know and they don't care. So IoT is big, and that's gonna bite us if we don't get a handle on it. And the name of the game there is segmentation, right? Segmentation and giving devices the right access to the right resources at the right time, right? So, for example, simplest form. Any banks in here? You know, a teller machine should only have access. Oh, there you go. A teller machine should only have access to the teller server. That's it. I don't want anybody looking at it. I just want one single communication, and that's it, right? Same kind of thing. A hospital, same kind of thing. There's certain devices only should have access to one thing. We have technologies to put that in place so that wherever it plugs in, whatever port, whatever it connects into the wireless, that we can give it its right access, right at the right time, and segment all that. And that's why it gets scary, because segmentation. Because everybody remembers how we got a little carried away with VLANs back in the day, right? VLANs came out. Oh man, we're gonna make a bunch of them, right? Then we figured out that it made this huge access list, and everybody got freaked out because it was like we couldn't control it. We had no idea who had access to what. And so now we have devices like the Identity Services Engine that helps you manage those segmentations, helps you manage those groups, and gives you control over that in more of a human readable fashion.
What would you say is the simplest bar none thing that people should do with their...
Most bang for the buck? Umbrella and AMP for endpoint. Most bang for the buck. I can set up a umbrella trial today. I mean, it's so simple. Whoever you're pointing your DNS to, Google or whoever, just point it to us and we'll give you a counsel. I use it for a litmus test too. You think your security is great? So sometimes I get guys that are like, man, we're good. You know, we don't have any problems. You know, it's like, all right, let's put umbrella out, and all the communications that are leaving. Now I'm seeing where everybody's going. It's like, oh well, you got 45 people reaching out to command and control centers. You know, they had no idea. Right? So use it as a litmus test, those type of things, and the ability to kind of knock that stuff down. And it's quite, very quick. Those two products alone give you the fastest north to south, east to west visibility control that you can get. And they're all software. It's easy to trial, easy to install, implement. But to give you an example how important it is, if you call our incident response team after you had a breach, that's the first two things they're going to put over everything. Umbrella and AMP for endpoint and everything. Because when they give you that stamp of approval and they say, okay, you're good, it's all gone, they use those two products to make sure it's gone. Umbrella foundation is DNS. All right, we'll say Google, right? Whoever, we're not taking over your DNS server. Whoever you're pointing to that after that, that'd be us. So then you point to us, and then as communication leaves and goes out there, and we also have an agent that sits on your roaming clients. So as the communication goes out there, if it's a bad domain, we'll just knock it down. Or if it's, you can actually set policy too to say, we don't allow gambling or porn, right? We just don't resolve the domain, right? Don't need a proxy for that. We're doing it quick in the DNS, right? So, and the cool thing about IoT is you can't put an agent on those devices because they're not an operating system. You can change the DNS. So why are my printers or why are my cameras reaching out to Hong Kong in the middle of the night? You know, it's weird, right? You need that visibility, and that's what Umbrella will do for you.